Betrayed by my own sister at 70, and then my son, cast aside at 68, my life savings stolen to fund their lies. Would I let them mock me as too old to catch them, or would I unravel their deceit and take back what was mine? The sting of their betrayal burns like a fresh wound, but so does the fire in my gut to make them pay. Subscribe and let me know from where you're reading. Let's dive into this story together. I was 68 when my world shattered. My name is Evelyn Marie Harper, and I'd spent decades building a life I thought was solid. A cozy two-bedroom home in a quiet Ohio suburb, a garden where I grew tomatoes and roses, and a nest egg I'd scraped together for my golden years. Widowed for 5 years, I'd learned to live alone after my husband Tom passed from a heart attack. I thought I'd faced the worst kind of pain back then, standing by his hospital bed, watching the man I'd loved for 40 years slip away. But last spring, as I sat in my dusty attic sorting through old boxes, I found a truth that cut deeper than any grief could. It started innocently enough. I was clearing out Tom's things, old tools, faded jackets, stuff I'd avoided touching since his death. I found a rusty toolbox tucked behind a stack of Christmas decorations, one I'd never bothered to open. Inside, beneath a tangle of screwdrivers, was a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded red ribbon. My heart skipped, thinking they might be old love letters from our early days. But when I opened the first one, the handwriting wasn't mine, and the words weren't meant for me. My darling Clara, you're my escape from her nagging Clara, my younger sister, my husband's lover. The letters, dated from the late 90s, detailed an affair that spanned years, right under my nose. I sat there, surrounded by cobwebs, my hands trembling as I read how Tom and Clara met in secret, laughed at my obliviousness, planned weekends away while I thought he was on business trips. The heartbreak was a physical ache, like someone had punched through my chest. Clara, my little sister, who I'd babysat when our parents worked late, whose hair I'd braided for prom, whose divorce I'd helped her through, she'd betrayed me in the worst way. And Tom, the man I'd cooked for, argued with, loved through every hardship, he'd made a fool of me. I might have buried that pain, stuffed the letters back in the box and pretended I'd never seen them, but then came the second blow, the one that turned my grief into rage. My son Marcus, 42 and always a bit too smooth with his words, started acting strange. He'd been my pride and joy, the boy I'd raised alone after Tom's death, pouring every spare dime into his college, his dreams. But lately, his visits were rare, his phone calls short. When he did show up, his eyes darted to my checkbook on the kitchen counter, or lingered on the safe in my study. I'd added him to my bank accounts years ago, just in case, he'd said, all sincerity, in case I got sick or couldn't manage. I trusted him, my mistake. It started with small things, a $200 withdrawal I didn't remember, a $500 transfer I hadn't approved. I called the bank, thinking it was a mistake, but the teller's voice was calm, almost pitying. Your son authorized those, Mrs. Harper, he's on the account. My stomach dropped. By the time I checked my statements, I found $47,000 missing, my retirement fund, my safety net, gone. I confronted Marcus over dinner, my voice shaking. Did you take money from my account? He laughed too quick, brushing it off. Mom, you're imagining things. Maybe you forgot a bill. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the same nervous tick he'd had as a kid when he lied about sneaking cookies. Then I found the proof. Marcus left his car parked in my driveway one night, too lazy to lock it. I don't know what possessed me, maybe instinct, maybe desperation, but I rummaged through his glove box. Tucked under a gas receipt was a bank statement, not mine but his. Transfers to a rental property in the Smoky Mountains, payments to Clara's credit card, even a receipt for a designer handbag. My money. My son was funneling my life savings to my sister, his aunt, the same woman who'd slept with my husband. I found a text on his phone, left open like he didn't care. She's too old to catch us, Clara. Let her think she's losing it. The words seared into me, their arrogance a slap in the face. The betrayal was a knife, twisting deeper with every thought. Clara, who I'd loved like a daughter, and Marcus, who I'd raised to be better, they'd turned my sacrifices into their play money. I pictured them laughing in some mountain cabin, toasting with wine bought with my savings, mocking me as a frail old woman too slow to notice, but they forgot who I was. I'd balanced budgets when Tom spent too much on his hobbies, taught Marcus to read when he struggled in school, rebuilt my life after widowhood. I wasn't frail, I was furious. I started small, playing the clueless widow they expected. I'd call Marcus, voice sweet, asking about his investments, watching him squirm. I invited Clara for coffee, chatting about old times while noting her new diamond earrings bought with my money, no doubt. At night I pored over bank records, traced transactions, built a paper trail. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got, not just at them, but at myself for trusting too long. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, family, my independence. They thought they'd outsmarted me, but I was just getting started. By the time I was done, they'd learn what happens when you underestimate Evelyn Marie Harper. The attic became my war room, a dusty sanctuary where I waged a silent battle against the people I'd loved most. Under the flickering glow of a single bulb, I spread out my evidence like a general planning an ambush. Bank statements, Tom's love letters to Clara, scribbled notes I'd jotted in the middle of sleepless nights. Every piece told a story of betrayal. $47,000 siphoned from my savings, my retirement fund, to fund Clara's lavish new life and a rental cabin in the Smoky Mountains. My son Marcus and my sister Clara thought they'd outsmarted me, laughing behind my back with that smug "she's too old to catch us." But I wasn't the frail widow they imagined. At 68, I was sharp, angry, and ready to fight. The heartbreak hadn't dulled since I found those letters in Tom's toolbox, exposing his affair with Clara. If anything, it had sharpened into something harder, rage mixed with a cold determination. I'd spent decades being the practical one, balancing checkbooks while Tom chased pipe dreams, teaching Marcus to tie his shoes when Clara was too busy flitting between boyfriends. Now they'd turned my trust against me. Marcus had access to my accounts from when I'd added him as a precaution after Tom's death. "Just in case, Mom," he'd said, his eyes wide with fake sincerity. I'd believed him, thinking my only child would protect me. Instead, he drained my savings to bankroll Clara's schemes. I started with the bank statements I'd found in Marcus's car, crumpled and careless, like he didn't think I'd ever look. The numbers didn't lie. Transfers to a property management company, payments to Clara's credit card, even a $2,000 charge for a spa weekend. My money frittered away on their indulgences. One receipt, tucked in an envelope, listed a cabin lease in the Smoky Mountains, $500 a month, paid from my account. Their hideout, I realized, where they planned their lies, maybe even laughed over wine while I sat at home clipping coupons to stretch my Social Security check. The thought made my stomach churn, but it also lit a fire. They weren't just stealing my money, they were stealing my dignity. I knew I couldn't confront them yet, not without ironclad proof. Marcus was too slippery, Clara too cunning. They'd spin lies, gaslight me, call me paranoid, so I became a detective in my own life. I started tailing Marcus, discreetly, using tricks I'd never imagined at my age. I wasn't about to climb fences or hide in bushes, but I knew his habits. He'd visit Clara's condo in Columbus, a sleek high-rise I'd never been invited to, always parking his shiny SUV out front. I'd drive by, parking a block away with a pair of thrift store binoculars, watching through my car window. One evening, I saw them on her balcony, laughing, Marcus handing her a thick envelope. My heart sank, but my resolve hardened. That envelope was my money, my future, handed over like pocket change. I needed help, someone who could see through the numbers, so I called Ruth, my old friend from church, a retired accountant, with a mind like a steel trap. Over coffee at my kitchen table, I spilled everything, the letters, the missing money, Marcus's texts. Ruth didn't flinch. "Evelyn, you're not crazy, they're thieves and we're going to nail them." She pulled out her laptop and logged into my online banking, something Marcus assumed I'd never figure out. We found a trail of withdrawals, some labeled consulting fees to a shell company in Clara's name. Ruth traced the cabin lease to a joint account Marcus had opened with Clara, funded entirely by my savings. "They're sloppy," Ruth said, her eyes gleaming, "and that's your advantage." The betrayal cut deeper with every discovery. Clara, who I'd loved like a daughter, who I'd driven to chemo when her ex left her high and dry, she'd stabbed me in the back, first with Tom, now with Marcus. And my son, the boy I'd stayed up nights worrying over, who I'd cheered at every soccer game, he'd sold me out for a cut of Clara's glamour. I found a note in his car, scribbled in Clara's loopy handwriting. Mem, keep her distracted, she's too old to catch on. Those words burned into me, not just for their cruelty but for their arrogance. They thought I was done, a relic too slow to fight back. They forgot I'd survived a cheating husband, raised a son alone, kept my house running on a widow's budget. I wasn't done, I was just getting started. I began planning, not just to expose them but to make them feel the weight of their deceit. I'd host a family dinner, invite Marcus, Clara, and a few loyal cousins, and lay my evidence on the table like a winning hand. But first, I needed more. I called Ruth again, and she suggested a private investigator. You need someone who can get dirt they can't deny, she said. I hesitated. PIs weren't cheap, and my funds were already gutted, but Ruth vouched for a guy named Leo, a gruff ex-cop who worked cheap for good causes. I met him at a diner, handed over the bank statements and told him everything. Leo's eyes narrowed. They're playing dirty, Evelyn. Let's play dirtier. As I drove home that night, the Ohio sky heavy with spring rain, I felt a shift. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was tempered by defiance. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for the respect I'd earned, the independence I'd built. Marcus and Clara thought they'd won, but they'd underestimated me. Soon they'd learn what a too-old woman could do. Every night, as the Ohio moon hung low over my little house, I sat in my attic war room, plotting like a woman possessed. The betrayal, Tom's affair with Clara, Marcus stealing my $47,000 savings had carved a hole in my heart, but it also lit a fire I hadn't felt in years. At 68, I was supposed to be slowing down, tending my roses, maybe knitting scarves for grandchildren I didn't have. Instead, I was playing detective, piecing together a case to take down my own son and sister. They thought I was too old to catch them, as Marcus had sneered in that damning text to Clara, but I was closing in, and soon they'd face the consequences of underestimating Evelyn Marie Harper. I'd become a master at playing the clueless widow they expected. When Marcus stopped by to check on me, I'd flutter about, offering him iced tea and asking vague questions about his business ventures. His answers were slick, but I caught the nervous twitch in his jaw when I mentioned my bank account. Just looking out for you, Mom, he'd say, that charming smile hiding a liar's heart. I'd nod, smile back, and note every word. With Clara, I played the sentimental sister, calling to reminisce about our childhood while she droned on about her busy life. I noticed her new diamond earrings, glinting under her condo's chandelier when I dropped by unannounced. My money, I thought, my stomach twisting. You're looking so well, Clara, I said, voice sweet as pie. She smirked, thinking she'd outsmarted me. Behind the scenes, I was relentless. Ruth, my accountant friend, had already helped me trace the paper trail, bank transfers to a Smoky Mountains cabin lease, payments to Clara's credit card, a joint account Marcus opened with her, but I needed more, something undeniable to make them squirm. Ruth connected me with Leo, the private investigator, a gruff man with a buzz cut and a handshake like a vice. Over burgers at a greasy diner, I handed him my folder of evidence. I want proof they can't lie their way out of, I told him. Leo grinned, his eyes sharp. Give me a week, Evelyn. I'll get you dirt. Leo delivered. He tailed Clara to the Smoky Mountains cabin, a cedar A-frame nestled in the pines, leased with my money. His photos showed Marcus unloading groceries from his SUV, Clara lounging on the deck in sunglasses, acting like a woman on vacation. One shot stopped me cold, Marcus carrying a box labeled Mom's files. My files. They'd gone through my safe, taken documents I'd kept for years, deeds, insurance policies, even my will. The audacity of it hit me like a slap. They weren't just stealing my money, they were dismantling my life, piece by piece. Leo also intercepted a text from Marcus to Clara. She's too old to catch us, keep pushing the lease renewals. Those words burned into my memory, became my fuel. Leo dug deeper, tracking down the cabin's landlord, a chatty woman named Darlene, who thought Clara was some rich aunt. Darlene told Leo that Clara bragged about her nephew funding her new start, dropping my money on spa trips and designer bags. The landlord even mentioned Clara's plans to buy the cabin outright, using family funds. My funds. I gripped Leo's photos so hard they creased, my anger mingling with a strange thrill. They were sloppy, just as Ruth had said, and their carelessness was my weapon. I decided to strike where it would hurt most, a family dinner, a staged reunion to heal old wounds. I'd invite Marcus, Clara, a few loyal cousins, and Ruth, who'd become my rock. I'd serve my mother's pot roast recipe, smile warmly, and then drop my evidence like a guillotine. But first, I needed to tighten the noose. I consulted a lawyer, Miss Delgado, a sharp woman with a reputation for shredding financial fraud cases. I met her in her Columbus office, a sleek space with law books lining the walls. I spread out my dossier, bank records, Leo's photos, the intercepted texts. Miss Delgado's eyes lit up. Evelyn, this is airtight. Fraud, theft, maybe even conspiracy. They're cooked. To keep up appearances, I leaned harder into my act. I left bank statements on my kitchen table when Marcus visited, watching his eyes widen before he changed the subject. The night of the family dinner, my dining room glowed with candlelight, the air thick with the scent of my mother's pot roast recipe. At 68, I'd hosted countless gatherings in this Ohio home, but none like this. Tonight wasn't about mending bonds, it was about tearing down lies. Marcus and Clara, my son and sister, had betrayed me, stealing $47,000 of my savings to fund their Smoky Mountains hideout, mocking me with their smug "she's too old to catch us." They thought they'd outsmarted me, but I'd spent weeks building a case with bank records, photos and texts. Tonight, I'd lay it all bare and reclaim my dignity. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of justice. I'd planned every detail. The table was set with my best china, the kind I'd saved for special occasions. Marcus arrived first, all charm, kissing my cheek like nothing was wrong. "Smells great, Mom," he said, his smile too wide. Clara swept in next, perfumed and overdressed, her diamond earrings bought with my money glinting under the chandelier. My cousins, Frank and Lilia, filled the room with chatter, unaware of the storm coming. Ruth, my accountant friend, sat quietly, her eyes sharp. Ms. Delgado, my lawyer, posed as a family friend, her briefcase tucked discreetly by her chair. I played the doting host, refilling wine glasses, my hands steady despite the fire in my chest. Dinner was a tense dance. Marcus joked about his business deals, dodging my pointed questions about his finances. Clara bragged about her new lifestyle, her voice dripping with arrogance. I smiled, nodded and passed the mashed potatoes, letting them think they were safe. My cousins laughed, reminiscing about old family picnics, but Ruth's knowing glance kept me grounded. Every bite I took tasted like resolve. I'd spent decades sacrificing for these people, raising Marcus alone, supporting Clara through her messes, and they'd repaid me with lies. No more. After dessert, I stood, tapping my glass with a spoon. The room fell quiet, all eyes on me. "I've been reflecting," I said, my voice steady, despite the knot in my throat. "Family means everything to me, but trust, that's fragile." Marcus shifted in his seat, his fork clinking against his plate. Clara's smile tightened, her fingers gripping her wine glass. I reached under the table, pulling out the dossier I'd hidden, a thick folder of bank statements, Leo's photos, intercepted texts. I placed it on the table like a guillotine, the thud echoing in the silence. "I found Tom's letters to you, Clara. Years of you and my husband, behind my back. And Marcus, my savings, $47,000, gone to fund your aunt's hideout." The room froze. Frank's jaw dropped. Leela gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Marcus stammered, his face flushing. "Mom, you're confused, you don't." I cut him off, sliding a photo across the table, him and Clara at the Smoky Mountains cabin, unloading groceries. Then another, the bank statement showing transfers to Clara's account. Then the text, blown up on a printed sheet, "She's too old to catch us." Clara's wine glass slipped, splashing red across the tablecloth. "Evelyn, this is a misunderstanding," she said, her voice shrill, but I wasn't done. "Misunderstanding," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "You stole my files, my money, my trust. You thought I was too old to notice, but I noticed everything." I nodded to Miss Delgado, who stood, her presence commanding. "I'm Miss Delgado, Evelyn's attorney, she said, opening her briefcase. We have evidence of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. You're looking at civil suits, maybe criminal charges. Marcus bolted upright, his chair scraping the floor, but Frank, a burly man with a protective streak, stepped in front of the door. Sit down, kid, Frank growled. Clara's facade crumbled. She sobbed, pointing at Marcus. He pushed me into it. I didn't want to hurt you, Evie. Marcus shouted back. Don't pin this on me. You said she'd never check. Their alliance fractured right there, their lies spilling out like the wine on the table. My cousins stared, horrified as the truth sank in. Ruth squeezed my hand under the table, her silent support anchoring me. I felt no joy, only a heavy satisfaction. I'd exposed them, stripped their deceit bare in front of the family they'd manipulated. I sat back, letting Miss Delgado outline the next steps: lawsuits, asset freezes, possible jail time. Marcus's face was ashen, Clara's streaked with mascara. They'd thought they could waltz through my life, taking what they wanted, mocking my age, but I'd outplayed them, not with their cunning, but with the quiet strength they'd never seen. As the candles flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, I looked at them, my son, my sister, and felt the weight of their betrayal lift just a fraction. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of my fight to take back what was mine. The dinner ended in chaos. Frank and Leela offered to drive me anywhere I needed, their loyalty a balm to my wounds. Ruth stayed to help clean up, whispering, "You did it, Evelyn." Miss Delgado promised to file the first motions by morning. As Marcus and Clara left, avoiding my eyes, I stood in my doorway, watching their cars disappear into the night. The heartbreak was still there, raw and aching, but so was my defiance. They'd learn what happens when you underestimate a woman like me. The morning after the dinner, my Ohio home felt different. Still my same old house with its chipped porch swing and rose garden, but lighter, as if the walls had shed the weight of Marcus and Clara's lies. At 68, I'd faced the worst betrayal: my late husband Tom's affair with my sister Clara, my son Marcus stealing $47,000 of my savings to fund their Smoky Mountains hideout, their cruel taunt that I was too old to catch them. But I had caught them, exposed their deceit at that candlelit dinner, and now, as the dust settled, I stood taller. The heartbreak hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned me. I'd fought for my dignity, my independence, and I was ready to reclaim my life. The aftermath moved fast, like a storm breaking after months of tension. Miss Delgado, my lawyer, filed charges the next day: fraud, theft, conspiracy. My dossier of evidence, bank records, Leo's photos, those damning texts, was airtight. Marcus and Clara didn't stand a chance in court. Within weeks they settled, desperate to avoid jail. They repaid every cent of the $47,000, plus damages for legal fees and emotional distress. The Smoky Mountains cabin was sold, the proceeds wired to my account. Miss Delgado called it a slam dunk, but to me it was more than money. It was proof I wasn't the frail widow they'd mocked. Cutting contact was harder. Marcus sent a letter, full of apologies and excuses. "I got caught up, Mom. I didn't mean to hurt you." Clara called once, sobbing, begging for forgiveness. I listened, stone-faced, then hung up. They weren't sorry for betraying me, just sorry they'd been caught. I changed my phone number, updated my will, and locked them out of my life. It hurt, like carving out a piece of my heart. Marcus was my son, Clara my sister, and I'd loved them fiercely, but love doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. I deserved better, and for the first time, I believed it. My cousins, Frank and Leela, rallied around me, inviting me to barbecues, checking in with calls. Ruth, my accountant friend, became my rock, helping me secure my accounts with new passwords and alerts. She even taught me to use an app to track my finances, laughing as I fumbled with my phone. "You're a force, Evelyn," she said. Their support filled some of the holes Marcus and Clara left, reminding me that family isn't just blood, it's loyalty. With my money back, I did something I'd never dared before. I planned a trip to Italy. I'd always dreamed of seeing Florence, walking cobblestone streets, tasting real gelato. Tom had scoffed at the idea years ago, saying we couldn't afford it, and after his death, I'd buried my dreams under bills and grief. But now, at 68, I booked a tour, packed a suitcase, and boarded a plane. The first night in Florence, I stood on a bridge over the Arno River. The the city's lights reflecting on the water. I felt alive, not too old but vibrant, free. I ate pasta in tiny trattorias, marveled at Renaissance art, and bought a silk scarf just because I wanted to. Every step was a victory, proof I'd taken back my life. Back home, I made changes. I hired a handyman to fix the porch swing Marcus had always promised to repair. I planted new roses in my garden, their red blooms a symbol of my resilience. I joined a book club at the library, where I met women my age who shared stories of their own battles, divorces, wayward kids, second chances. Their laughter and strength reminded me I wasn't alone. I even started volunteering at a local food bank, finding purpose in helping others rebuild just as I had. The betrayal still stung, like a bruise that fades but never quite disappears. Some nights I'd sit in my attic, once my war room, now just storage, and wonder where I'd gone wrong with Marcus, how Clara had strayed so far. But I stopped blaming myself. Their choices weren't my failures. I'd given them love, trust, chances, and they'd squandered it. I forgave them not for their sake but for mine, to let go of the anger that could have consumed me. One evening, as I sipped tea on my porch, Ruth stopped by with a bottle of wine. We toasted to new beginnings, the crickets chirping around us. "You showed them, Evelyn," she said. "You showed everyone." I smiled, thinking of Marcus and Clara, their smugness shattered, their hideout gone. They'd underestimated me, but I'd proven what a too-old woman could do, not with vengeance, but with quiet, unshakable strength. If you're reading this, know that betrayal doesn't get the last word. Whether you're in Ohio or halfway across the world, you've got a fight in you too. Have you ever faced disrespect and fought back? Share your story, let's keep this fire alive. I'm 68, standing on my porch, looking at a future I built myself. And I'm not done yet.